Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. Today's date is February the 8th in the year of our Lord, 2024. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight, debate a little bit about an attack on power structure. Because our position here at Soluble is that this is what we're dealing with when it comes to the current political climate that we find ourselves in today, especially this 90 plus percentile of African American voters who tend to go Democratic when it comes to election cycles. Attack on power structure. Now, it seems as if the Supreme Court is going to give the former president somewhat of a victory today, tomorrow, or whenever the final ruling comes down concerning his removal from the ballots in the state of Colorado and or possibly Maine. It seems as if the Supreme Court is going to come down on the side of the former president. Now, in this situation, the only thing that we have to fear as Democrats and common sense independents is fear itself. I mean, we voted the former president out once. We have the numbers to do it again. As a matter of fact, the numbers might be even greater this time around because there are a lot of people who weren't of voting age in the election of 2020 who now will be eligible to vote in the election of 2024. Now, when it comes to this 90 something plus percentile of African Americans who tend to go Democrat in election cycles, and for good reason. You have seats at the table, and not only do you have seats, but you have voices to discuss any and all things that matter and or affect you as a voting group, as American citizens, et cetera, et cetera. You have voices at the table. Now, we've seen in the past in America where African Americans in the eyes of Caucasians seem to be getting power here or power there, or what some racist Caucasians might consider to be a little bit too much power. And in past times in America, they have been able to forcefully push back with willful disregard for the law because the law was pretty much on their side. Now, fast forward to today, at the current present time that we're in today, in the year 2024. The vote is very powerful. The vote is very powerful. It's not a laughing matter. And we've stated here on Soluble before, oftentimes when African Americans in this country have encountered problems or, wanting to redress grievances that they were going through or suffering, of course you have the right to protest and to peaceably assemble, which, in times past, we've noted here at Soluble, has been widely mocked, laughed at, ridiculed. But when you flip that script and you go from peaceful protest to using your power at the ballot box, then, all the laughter, the mockery, the ridicule, it goes away. Because this is where your true power lies. Now, we have a former president who first came on the scene and began to run for the levels of power, the levels of control in this country through the presidency off of a fake birth of conspiracy. Out of all the things that this former president could have thought of or found to say about the first African-American president in the history of the country, he did anything but. And this is, how he rode, to power, denouncing former President Barack Obama's presidency, saying that he wasn't really a natural citizen, his birth certificate was fake, et cetera, et cetera. And from then to now, the former president likes to peddle in um, conspiracies, lies about things being rigged or faked, unless, and this is really important, unless it has the Trump name or the Trump brand attached to it, then it's very much real. Now, we can only go back to, before the former president took office, in the last, months, days, or what have you, weeks of the Obama presidency, and the job numbers were coming out. Lest we forget, the job numbers were coming out, on a monthly basis. And, the former president, Trump, had nothing good to say, nothing positive to say. All those numbers were fake. They were rigged on behalf of the deep state, if you will, to let the former President Obama go out on a high note and or help candidate at the time, Senator Clinton. And as soon as the former president, Trump that is, took office, then all of a sudden the numbers were real. All of a sudden the numbers were real. Now, an attack on power structure. It should tell this 90-something plus percentile of African American voters exactly how much power you hold with just one single vote, or a 90-something plus percentile group of people voting one way, and that's Democrat. Now, make no mistake about it. January the 6th happened. We all witnessed it. We all saw for the first time in American history that there wasn't a peaceful transfer of power and a serious pushback to try to overthrow a free and fair election. This insurrection, this event that happened on January 6th was a political attack on the power structure of the African American vote. Now, the Republican Party and our colleagues on the right, they can do, all sorts of things. They can use all kind of methods or tactics, if you will, to try and woo the African American voter away from the Democrat Party, which, for as long as I can remember, and I've been around for 56 years, thank God, but for as long as I can remember, this has been the party of the middle class, of the working man and the working woman. This is what this party has stood for. It hasn't changed. It hasn't wavered. And it's been an unequivocal stance by the Democrat Party on what it stands for. It is a party that wants to grow the economy from the middle class out, with rewards for each and every segment of America, regardless of race, creed, color, financial status, whether you're a millionaire, billionaire, thousandaire, or what have you. And they've made no bones about it, that this is what the party stands for. Now, at the same time, for as long as I can remember in these 56 years that the Almighty has blessed me with, the Republican Party has been a party of fiscal conservatism. Fiscal conservatism. They don't want, big government. This is a party of states' rights, or letting the states decide. And they don't want big government in it. Now, we know that for those who have been paying attention, especially this 90-something plus percentile of African American voters, we know that this harken back to, a time before the Civil War, where, a lot of Southern states wanted the right to control their own destiny in those states, whether it was low taxes, whether it was the right to keep slaves, you know, endlessly, you know, with no end in sight. You know, they wanted the right to, you know, occupy the governor's mansion and bring along 3 or 4 family members. Now, just briefly, you know, without straying too much, this is something that is akin to a wayward child who doesn't really want his or her parents watching what they're doing and ready and willing to check them at any given moment because they're straying, they're going too far, they're not carrying themselves inside the family values that have existed in the family for years and years. This is what a states' rights party looks like. Now, big government versus state government. It is a great system of checks and balances that the framers have put in place so that, you know, the states don't go too far, because we know that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So states' rights, pushing back on big government, is a legitimate, you know, stance for a party to take. But our position here at Soluble is that you need that. You need the federal government as a way of having a power check to maintain, if you will, law and order, you know, amongst the states. And we've seen it. We've seen it, you know, countless amount of times. You know, good old boyism. You know, the states that are starting to do things that stray away from what the Constitution actually says about the people of the United States of America. And so, you know, one can understand at this day and time, looking back on history up to now, why, you know, the Republicans would champion this government stance of states' rights. But that's neither here or there. That's just a brief summary. Now, for that 90 something plus percentile of African American voters, this is what has led us to, you know, turn our backs on the Republican Party. Let's just be frank here. Now, if you have a 90 something plus percentile group of people, race of people, politically thinking people that are voting one way, that is serious power. That is a serious power structure. Now, while we at Soluble don't think that it's really dawned on African Americans in this country as to, you know, what kind of power that lies within their grasp if they show up on election day. This is why, you know, here at Soluble we stress it so much that we need turnout. We want to get this blue wave to start to form. And, you know, by the time November comes, it washes ashore with sweeping change, with a dominant force that you know takes these seats that are Republican, take these states that may be red, and flip them to the best of our ability. Whether we flip the seats totally to Democrat or whether we change the state from red to purple. It's imperative. It's important for democracy. Now, without saying it, without coming outright and saying it, and this is why, as African Americans, we should, you know, frown on the Republican Party even further, because they won't come out outright and say that, you know, the African American voting bloc is very powerful, and you know they're not going to join us as Republicans, so we have to find a way to beat them, and that's fine. You know, that's the American way, where you have this freedom of choice, this freedom to, you know, take whatever measures necessary short of violence in order to, win political power in the country. We understand, we get that, but an outright attack like what we seen on January 6th is totally unconstitutional. And as a 90 something plus percentile voting bloc of African Americans, you are the last best hope right now for American democracy as we've known it. It's been a work in progress from the 19th century to the 20th century to the 21st century. It's been a work in progress. And slowly but surely, African Americans in this country have made gains all across the board in the political spectrum, social economics, CEOs, you name it. We have made positive strides. We have made progress in a way that takes us away from a time and place where our power could be attacked and diminished at at the whim of any Republicans choosing. We're not there now. But if we don't pay attention to what's going on as a voting bloc, we could seriously wind up back in that same position again. And so this is, what has propelled the former president to such power where one man has an entire group of voters, when it comes to Republican voters, totally in fear, totally under his spell. While at the same time, he's so inept. He's so incapable of being presidential, and fitting the bill of the most powerful man in the world. The former president is not up to the task, knowledge-wise, education-wise. He's not up to the task as it relates to character that one should have when they're aspiring to the highest office in the land. And so, we have to ask ourselves as African American voters, if not the Democrat Party, which party? Where do we go? Where do we go to ensure that we have domestic tranquility, the ability to, live free, live happy, be able to prosper, be able to grow as we see fit as American citizens and as a people? And so here we are. And, in today's day and time, it's not so much up in your face as it, would have been 100 years ago. But lo and behold, trust and believe, we are at a point, especially as this African American 90 something plus percentile voting bloc, where, we're coming under attack. So while we're getting ready to make this decision, this crucial decision as to, who will be our leader for the next 4 years, beginning in November, while we're here getting ready to make this decision, let's look at everything that's going on and be able to put it into the right context. Why would the Republican Party attack the voting power structure of African Americans versus trying to make the case as to why we should vote Republican? This has been the age-old American way. And, we're confident here at Soluble that we will, turn this vote out again in November. We have to. We have to. Like the former president, we're going to, here at Soluble, say the quiet part out loud. because a lot of African Americans, probably don't get it. They may never get it unless we spell it out exactly for what it is. The bottom line is the main reason, the first and foremost reason as to why the former president didn't get a second term is because of the African American vote. Let's just make that crystal clear. The main reason, probably the sole reason, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the turnout, the level of turnout, if not the main reason, one of the sole reasons why the former president didn't get another 4 years, a second term, is because of the African American vote. Now, let's look at it for what it is from both parties. In this, privileged time that I've been blessed to be here on this earth, we haven't seen anything from the Republican Party as it relates to so-called minority candidates, whether in the form of running for president or vice president. You haven't seen it. And, on that same note, you have the ousted former speaker and Kevin McCarthy. Now that he's ousted, he lets the cat out of the bag if you're really paying attention to what's going on. He goes to his home state of California, goes to his district, and he begins to sulk and pout and pour out all of his grievances, about what's broken with Washington, D.C. And one of the things that relates to this attack on the power structure is one of the things that he said is, he looks at his party when he's, before he was ousted as speaker. He's at the podium. And he's the House Speaker. He looks at his colleagues, on the right side of the aisle in the House, and it looks like the good old boys country club. These are words that we're taking from the former speaker. We may not be quoting them verbatim as to what he said, but the former speaker has somewhat told us that his side of the aisle looks like, the good old boys country club. When he looks at the Democrat side of the aisle, it looks like the true American tapestry, a melting pot of races coming together under one democracy with liberty and justice for all. This is the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party. Now, you see somewhat in the Republican Party that it's not strictly, a party of Caucasians. We know that. We get that. And we're not trying to suggest that that's what the former speaker was saying. But where are these voices, for equality, for fairness, for a leveling of the playing field in all facets of American life? You have Senator Tim Scott, who was put there by appointment, and this is very important to note. The distinguished senator from South Carolina, Senator Scott, was not, and I repeat, was not elected by the people of South Carolina. He was appointed by former Governor Haley at the time to the Senate seat for retiring Senator DeMint. This is how he got the position. Now, at the same time, you will see the senator, lavishing all kind of praises on the former president. And we don't begrudge that. We're not holding that against the senator, from Republican to lavish praise, and all kind of platitudes about, his accomplishments and the things that he's done. But where are the other voices? Where are the other African American voices that will make us, and us being this 90 something plus percentile voting block of African Americans who vote Democrat? Where are the other voices in this party that would make us, stop and say, well, wait a minute. This is also a party with a broad tent when it comes to the racial makeup of the United States of America. We don't see it. We don't see it. And as I said, I've been blessed to have 56 years of life on this planet, in this world. I haven't seen it. And so when you see an appointed senator, not elected, but an appointed senator, one and only, lavishing praises on, such a flawed candidate, this is not an independent voice. Basically, Senator Scott has to go along with the drumbeat of whatever the lead Republican or Republicans are saying or doing at the time. How is that, as a so-called minority in a states' rights party, with first and foremost believing that states, should have the right to retain their slaves for as long as they seem necessary? What kind of party is this for one lone African American, appointed, not elected, but appointed, where we should look at it and say that, maybe we should, take a long look at this party because Senator Scott is saying and doing good and or great things in the Republican Party as it relates to the needs, desires, or wants of African Americans in this country. And I think I can speak for the vast majority of African Americans, say that need, that desire, that want is simply for a level playing field. Simply for a level playing field. Now, can we look at Senator Scott as a lone wolf in the Republican Party and say that, he's doing it? He's getting things done. He's getting things accomplished. An attack on a power structure, and that power structure being that 90 something plus percentile of African American voters who vote Democrat in election cycles after election cycle. This party has, the Republican Party that is, has every opportunity, even now, leading up to the elections of November 2020. They have every opportunity to make the case to me, to you, to each and every voting age African American living in this country. They have a chance to make the case to sway us, to change our minds. Here, just a few weeks ago, last month, we had the Iowa caucuses, and we didn't fail to mention to you that there are a lot of different groups in the state that were holding events, sponsoring events, gatherings, if you will, for Republican primary candidates to show up and address their concerns, address their wants, or the things that they would like to see get done in the country. Now, out of all those groups that sponsored these events, that hosted these events, you had candidates showing up. It may have been one or two candidates. It may have been, 5 or 6 candidates. It may have been the whole lot of the candidates when it comes to those who are running for the presidential nomination from the Republican side. But there was one that, we couldn't help but to take note of here at Soluble, because we are that, minority form, that African American minority form, so-called. The Iowa minority forum, hosted an event, you know, looking for the Republican candidates to show up and, make the case to them as to how they would address their needs, their concerns, going on in the state or throughout the whole country. How many showed up to the Iowa Minority Forum? Now, you don't have to take Soluble's word for it here on this particular claim. You can do your own research. It's right there for all to see. But regardless of whether you're going to do your research or not, and we encourage you to always do, so you'll be well informed, so you'll stay well informed. Not one. So, as a 90-something plus percentile voting block, you're under attack. Your vote is under attack. Going into the elections of November 2020, in our neighborhoods, in our districts, in our communities where there are polling places or voting offices, if you will, they're trying to close them. They're trying to eliminate them. They're trying to reduce the numbers of places where you can go and vote. They're trying to reduce the early voting. They're trying to put complications in place across the board as it relates to voter turnout in African American neighborhoods, communities, and our districts. And this is, the beginning of the attack on a power structure. Now, while you have that power structure, you also have the power to defeat it, to defeat this attack, or be defeated by this attack. You see the former president, out on the campaign trail. And when you listen to him talk, it seems like it's a revenge tour. The return of the MAGArites, part 2. Donald's revenge. That's how we can title it. Because this is what the former president, is giving us on the campaign trail. So why should we be led to believe anything else? But this is the turning point. And, you have our colleagues on the right threatening secession, talking about civil war. Why? Why does it have to come to this simply because you can't win elections? And this is what we, as that 90-something plus percentile voting block, have to be paying attention to. You've been set back in the past. You've been set back by these attacks as it relates to, interruptions in your daily lives, towards financial progress, progress in home ownership, progress in rising through the ranks of job pay, CEO eligibility. Now is not the time to, not really understand or know what's going on in this political climate that we currently find ourselves in. Now, saying the quiet part out loud once again, a good portion of Republican voters in this country, and, to tell the truth, a good part of, the Caucasians in this country feel as if this power structure that you have in the ability to vote in leaders or vote out leaders, this power structure is very threatening, because that is just that. It's power. And this is what this is all about. Now, if the Republicans want to see you with this power, or don't mind you, enter into these power circles or power structures in order to enact change, for disenfranchised communities, downtrodden communities, communities that underfunded throughout American history. If they didn't have a problem with it, they would be coming out to woo you. They will be coming out to make the case to African American voters. They will be going to places like the Iowa Minority Forum to address your concerns and bring you in to the political circle that is the Republican Party. But you're on the outside looking in. Don't take my word for it here at Soluble. Look no further than the distinguished senator from South Carolina by appointment. You had, one of the leading surgeons in the country in Secretary of Housing, Ben Carson, one of the leading surgeons in the country. Before he ran for the office of President of the United States, one of the few African Americans who make up the Republican power structure. And out of all places that the former president saw fit to put him, it was over housing and urban development. Of all places, let's put, Dr. Carson over the projects and urban development. And what makes it, a shame and a disgrace for us, and don't be fooled, don't believe the hype. He's a yes man. He was a yes man in the position. And as two of the more prominent figures in the Republican Party, in the appointed Senator Scott and Dr. Carson, who was head of housing and urban development. Who else do the Republicans have, when it comes to so-called minorities? Here we have a party that's been states' right since day one. They jumped ship in the early 40s because then President Truman, sought to integrate the military. You had a few Dixiecrats led by Strom Thurmond jump ship to the Republican Party, and nothing has changed from then to now. From then to now. And so the Republican Party knows that it's in trouble. Now, you would think that the American way would be, for a party like this with a change in demographic, with an America that's becoming less racially divided. You would think that the party would take that long look in the mirror. To take that long look in the mirror and say, what am I doing wrong here? And how can I remake myself so that I'm a party that's more reflective of today's 2024 America? But they won't. They haven't. And so as a voting block, as any one member or a whole voting block of African-American voters who 90-something plus percentile vote Democrat, you have to ask yourself why. You have to ask yourself why. And in asking yourself this, in your heart of hearts, if the first thing that comes to mind is racism, then you have to stay, where you are. You have to stay where you are because you have seats at the table and you have voices in those seats. The Republican Party knows this. They know it. And so they have two options here. They can court you. They can, go to events like an Iowa Minority Forum and make the case. But we're in a rut. We're in a day and time now where we have this party who doesn't want to reach out, and spread that broad Republican tent, over other races. But what they choose to do instead is attack this power structure and A, make it harder for them to vote, B, stop them from voting altogether. And so this is where you're at as a 90-something plus percentile. Now, They can't make the case on what seems like any one, issue as far as why they should be president of the United States and not Joseph R. Biden. We look at the energy problem, the energy crisis we may or not face. We look at, foreign policy, how the world is on fire, the Middle East, Russia and Ukraine, China threatening Taiwan. We look at prescription drug prices. We look at, a woman's right to make her own medical decisions. We look at the Supreme Court. We take a look at all of these things, and if we don't like what we see, there are your seats. There is your party in the Democratic Party. They've had an opportunity to spread this tent, to spread this broad tent over all races in America, over the entire melting pot. I like to conserve in some areas. I'm not going to say that I'm a conservative as it relates to states' rights and fiscal responsibility, because they lie and cheat, and it's not to say that Democrats don't. But I'm a conservative in a lot of ways. But they won't reach out. They won't make the case because you don't fit the bill. And it's obvious. You've never fitted the bill. From the days of the revolt led by Strom Thurmond to now, what have we had in this party? Now, we know what we got when it comes to the election of 2008. You had a lot of Democrats, running for the job. And we know the end result was former President Barack Obama was sworn in after a hard-fought battle and after a free and fair election was held. And we saw for the first time in America where the best man for the job, and this is what should truly count, the best man for the job, regardless of race, regardless of religious preference, the best man for the job was sworn into office. We don't get that from the Republican side. What we got right now is the best man or men or woman, for that matter, are falling in line. They're bending the knee. They're ready to kiss the ring and anoint the former president, Donald J. Trump, as the Republican nominee for the office of President of the United States of America. Now, I don't think that it begs the question, is the former president, Donald J. Trump, the best man for the job? I don't think it begs the question. I think that the American people are intelligent enough to make that decision for themselves. And so, it shows just how out of touch the Republican Party has become. Because times have changed. America has changed. But lo and behold, the Republican Party remains the same. This is not the best man for the job. This is not the person, and when it comes to the former president, who can lead America into a better and brighter future. This is not the man for the job who is going to make our adversaries or even our allies look, towards America, like it always has, with envy. Because we have free and fair elections and we move forward, regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican. And our position here at Soluble is that the former president Donald J. Trump is not the man to do this. So, leading up to November of this year, when we will all begin to go out and cast our ballot to choose our next leader, this is, a full prong, full speed ahead attack on the power structure. And what we're seeing indications that if this party, being the Republican Party, doesn't get its way, then we could have something even more serious on our hands than what we had on January the 6th of 2021. But it's not the time to get discouraged. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Now, if there's anyone out there who is listening, who begs to differ, we welcome. We welcome that opinion. We welcome that opinion. But our position here at Soluble, unequivocally, unwavering, is that this is an attack on a power structure. And that power structure is the ability of the African American to come together as a voting bloc and choose a leader in this country. It's the American way. Now, one other thing that we're going to mention, and lest we forget, we're here to solve. We're not here to stir up controversy, rehash old conspiracies, or tell lies, or further soil or contaminate the political process to make it worse than what it already is. Our goal here is to solve. And so if the truth is going to be controversial, then regrettably, controversy will be the order of the day. Because here at Soluble, we're going to give you the truth as best we see it. We're not perfect. We're human. So that's why we welcome, different commentation. We welcome outside opinion. But without a shadow of a doubt, unless you're fooling yourself, unless you just landed on the planet Earth after spending, the entirety of your life on the planet Mars, what we're dealing with right now in this political climate is an attack on the African American voting bloc, without a doubt. Now, the former president, whether he'll ever say it or not remains to be seen. We doubt it here at Soluble. But the former president, deep down, he knows that the election of 2020 wasn't stolen. After the heated summer of 2020, the American people had, become fed up with the fact that domestic tranquility has seemed to have eroded, evaporated, or all together began to disappear. And let's not forget that the former president, he lost the popular vote when he ran against Senator Clinton. He lost the popular vote. And, if you recall, even then he was saying that, there were people who were illegally voting. There's no way I lost the popular vote. And, the former president took it upon himself to have it investigated, to have an audit, if you will, of the votes that were cast in the election of 2016. And even after it came back that there was no, illegal voting going on, there were no dead people voting, there was nothing rigged about it, that he actually lost the popular vote, he still stuck to his guns. And so, we have to think about this when it comes to choosing a commander-in-chief. This is an attack on the power structure. And, we're looking forward to voters, period, but especially those voters of African American descent, to make the case to the contrary. as to what we're saying here is soluble. If this is not an attack on a power structure, then what is? We've moved past, the Tulsa riots, the burning down of Black Wall Street. We've moved past, past massacres, past Jim Crow lynchings, past voter intimidation at the booths. Whether it came in the form of outright threats, poll taxes, literacy tests. We've moved past that. But you're still under attack. And that's what we're currently seeing right here and now. That's what we're currently seeing. You've had the former president bring out his lawyers. One who we take note of was Rudy Giuliani, who falsely claimed that in Atlanta, they were passing around voting ballots like they were vials of heroin. No evidence to back it up. No evidence whatsoever to back it up. But this was his claim. And so, as a voting bloc of 90-something plus percentile, we have to be thankful and grateful that we live in a system, under a system where, accusations have to be backed up by evidence. Now, if we recall, the accusations were bold. They were adamant. They were absolute. But when it came to the evidence that should have went along with the accusations to make one happy relationship, one happy marriage, the evidence was unwilling. The evidence couldn't be found. The evidence left the accusation standing at the altar. And the former president still stuck to his guns and said that, regardless of what you're seeing or hearing, this is a happy marriage. If our colleagues on the right and, this party that has went so far rogue right was a party of inclusion, you wouldn't see these actions. You wouldn't see these false accusations. And so what the former president has done, he's muddied up the water so much that a lot of American citizens don't really know what to believe. So that's why, we have the position here at Soluble is not only to pay attention to what's going on, what's being said, whether it's here, whether it's on some of the major news outlets. Do your own research. Do your own research. Now the attack is somewhat low key. It's disguised because we have a party here that's not willing to come right out and say that the voting bloc of African Americans in this country is a threat, to white supremacy, to Caucasian rule. They won't say it. And our position here at Soluble is that, if we can't speak truth to power, then where do we go? If the truth is controversial, what kind of republic will we wind up being in just 5 to 10 years? We've seen what the former president has done to democracy in our institutions and how he's attempted to undermine and tear down a system of checks and balances. All of a sudden, the FBI is not worthy. It needs to be shut down. All of a sudden, the Department of Justice is not worthy. It needs to be investigated and shut down. Why wasn't this the case when the former president was in office and he had, oh my God, the name escapes me now. But he had a head of the Department of Justice, and there wasn't a problem. There wasn't a problem. But now all of a sudden, that this African-American voting bloc has taken a second term away from the former president. Now all of a sudden, everything is a mess, and it's not legitimate. in some of these sacred institutions that has kept America afloat since day one, since 1776. What can the Republican Party do with this power structure of 90-something plus percentile of African American voters? You have the power to woo them. You have the power to persuade them to cross the aisle. Why don't you? What is the message? There is no message. They can't adapt. They can't change. They can't come to terms with the fact that America has changed. The voting demographics have changed. Racism is a weak subject to run on. It's a weak course to charter when you're trying to charter a course for the Oval Office. But here's a party that's stuck in its ways. Now, as African Americans, you know we've known what it's been like. You know, we pretty much read it in the history books because it doesn't affect us now today. Because all of those who came before us endured. They weathered the storm. They persevered until we got closer as a nation with the inclusion of African Americans to being, you know, truly one nation under God, with a constitution that is not just words on paper. They're actually spoken into existence. They're actually words on paper that are being brought out into everyday public life and put into action. That's where we're at now. That's where we're at. This is an attack on the power structure of African American voters. So let's let the Supreme Court do what it does. If they're going to say that, you know, the former president can't be kept off the ballot in the states of Colorado, the states of Maine, then so be it. What we have to trust and believe and rest assured in or on is that if we turn out, if this 90-something plus percentile of voters show up and cast a vote, then the republic will survive. You know, of course, as I said, you hear these threats about secession, civil war. You know, some of these disgruntled Republicans are talking about leaving the country and, you know, living abroad, moving back to Europe or somewhere. Let it be. Let it be. That should be nothing as it relates to a cause of concern for us. What we should be doing as voting Americans, regardless of race, is to be looking for the best person for the job that can move America forward in a way that reflects inclusion. One nation under God, with truly liberty and justice for all. And, you know, up to this point, we've tasted it a little bit. We've seen it in little bits and pieces. But now we have the chance, and there's power in our hand to make this pendulum swing permanently towards liberty and justice for all. So make no mistake about it. This is an attack on a power structure, a voting bloc as it relates to African American voters. So our position here at Soluble is we encourage you to show up on election day, come this November. We encourage you to show up. And, you know, if the Republican Party is your party of choice, then so be it. It's great to be an American. But, you know, for those of us who are convinced and who know, you know, from what we've endured when it comes to the struggles of the past, you know, there's been lots of times in the past where there's been an attack on the power structure that succeeded. And it pushed us back. It set us back. And so Dr. King is gone. He's on the other side. You know, Lincoln is gone. Kennedy is gone. Reagan is gone. It's up to us now. those of us who are still in the land of the living and working to keep this a thriving and functioning democracy for all people. We can withstand the attack. First, we have to acknowledge that is so. We have to acknowledge that is so, that is an attack on our vote. Ask ourselves why, and become more determined than ever to go out and make your voices heard. Because if we sit on the sidelines, if we sit out, if we are 90-something plus percentile voting block, but only show up at a level of 40%, at a level of 70%, then it's a good chance that we're going to lose this election. You know, some of the experts, some of the fact checkers, some of the counters have said that, you know, President Biden, you know, he won by some 40-something thousand odd votes in a few states that put him over the top. So now is not the time to be dismayed or discouraged or disillusioned. Now is the time to get engaged and pay attention to what's going on, where the attack is coming from, why it's coming, and what the end result is going to be if the attack succeeds. And last but not least, you know, you have to ask yourself as African American voters, are you willing to be a voting majority? Are you willing to be a voting majority that is actually being controlled by a voting minority? Now we've sent the former president packing after 4 years because, you know, not because of, you know, his race or we didn't like the way he combed his hair or the way he dressed. He just simply was not up to the job. That's it, plain and simple. So we sent him packing. So as a voting majority, you have the power. You have the power to remain a majority or sit on the sidelines and once again be controlled by a minority, a voting minority. So that's something to think about, you know, for now until, you know, we come on air again to bring you facts and you know, doing our research and paying attention to what's going on. Here's something to think about for, you know, that 90-something plus percentile of African American voters. You know, here, it's been some years back now. It's probably been a little more than 10. So this may have, you know, escaped some of our memories. But you had a Republican National Committee chairman in Michael Steele. Those of you who remember, Michael Steele, Republican out of the state of Maryland, if we make no mistake. Here a couple years back, we had this man, out of all the things that he could have done to, you know, bring shame and disgrace upon a race of people in this country who have been struggling, who knows what struggle is like, who knows what bondage is like, who knows what it's like to, you know, try to make progress on a playing field that's not level. We know what it's like. And out of all the things that we could have seen this Republican so-called minority, so-called African American do in the Republican Party, he apologizes. Let me repeat that. He apologizes to, of all people, may God rest his soul, Rush Limbaugh. So that should tell you a lot about what kind of pull, what kind of seats you have at the table, and voices in those seats that you would have in the Republican Party. Now, instead of attacking a power structure like a 90-something plus percentile of African American voters, they could come to us and you know, let's discuss the issues. Let's debate. Let's talk about it. You know, make the case to me as to why I should leave the Democratic Party and become a Republican. Is it because they can't get out of their own racist, discriminatory way? What is it? Maybe the distinguished senator from South Carolina, who was made to be a senator by appointment, maybe he can tell us. You know, maybe he can tell us. Now, in closing, and we're going to discuss this, you know, a lot more into detail, a lot more going forward, towards the month of November. We don't want to be the party of handouts, and this is the knock on the African American voter or African American citizen, in this country from Republican circles, that we're lazy, we don't want to work. And even though it could be, anything further from the truth, nothing could be more ridiculous. This is the broad brush that they want to paint us all with. And you've heard the distinguished senator from South Carolina, one of the only so-called minorities in this Republican Party. You've heard him discuss it. Fathers not being in the home, how welfare has set the African American family back, and he's right. He's right. We totally agree with him here at Soluble, and we're going to discuss it, in more detail leading up to the elections of 2024. But here is what we find very perplexing and troubling here at Soluble. Why can't this distinguished senator from South Carolina come out and make the case? He's an African American. Why can't he make the case to us? This 90-something plus percentile voting block that is in Democratic circles. Why can't he make the case that coming to the Republican Party, voting in Republican circles, will create this bright new day for African Americans all across the country? Why can't he make the case? If the Republican Party is serving him well, should it not, serve the vast majority of African Americans in this country well also? This is what the Democrat Party is doing. It's a welcoming party for all those who want to have a seat and a voice at the table. It's a welcoming party. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't put out lies and false propaganda. It doesn't put forth flawed candidates with scores to settle, with grudges. Candidates that seem to like nothing about the American government structure, but so badly and desperately wants to be president of the United States of America. So in closing, know the signs of what an attack on a power structure looks like. And you have to ask yourself, if you're a part of that 90-something plus percentile African American voter, here's a party that, by their own accounts, it is a patriotic, country first party. It's a party of bravery. You see the symbol of the party is the elephant. And the elephant, we know, in the wild, moves most animals out of his path. So what is the party afraid of? Why can't they make the case to African American voters? Why can't they send a distinguished senator from South Carolina or the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in Ben Carson? Why can't they send him on the campaign trail to make the case? Versus attacking you as a voting bloc. Now, if this attack succeeds, this is pretty much the beginning of a setback for not only those of us who are here in the present, but on our children and grandchildren. Because they know that the numbers don't lie. But do they want to reach out to those numbers and say, come and join us in this movement? No. They want to create lies about the election, making it seem as if dead people were voting. African Americans were in voting offices or voting precincts in Atlanta, stuffing ballot boxes with no evidence. So this is the attack. However subtle it may be, however low key it may be, this is an attack on your ability to vote. This is an attack on your ability to vote and have a say-so in this democracy now and moving forward into the future like never before. The Republican Party knows it. They see the numbers. They see the percentage of African Americans who are voting for Democrats in this country all across the board, governor, senator, congressman, president of the United States. They see it. And they have every opportunity to say, look, the Democrats are giving you something good. They're offering you something good on behalf of the country. But we have something better. They have the opportunity right now, while they're on the campaign trail. And of all things, what do you have that further, cements what I'm saying as truth? You have former Ambassador Haley, who is, born in this country. She's eligible to be president of the United States, but her parents are from India. She's Indian. She has no grounds. She has no background. The Indian people who currently reside in America or who have been here since the 19th and or the 18th century have not endured the things that African Americans have endured in this country. But here we have former Ambassador Haley, who seems to be speaking on behalf of the Republican Party, because no one has come out and rebuked what she said. No one in Republican circles have come out and refuted what she said, that America is not a racist country and it's never been a racist country. How is that for a slap in the face to those of us who know what our ancestors have went through, some of the things that we still see currently going on in the country, that we have to get out and vote to defeat or to make, a permanent relic of the past? But this is what we have. Out of all the things that former Ambassador Haley could be saying on the campaign trail, more lies, more half-truths, more falsehoods. And it's all right to say it. It's okay to say that America has been a racist country, because we're making progress now. And that's the one good thing about America that we should be able to say as Democrats. Slowly but surely, America has always tried to right its wrongs of the past. And we get the fear. We get the fear of a surge of African-American eligible voters. Numbers matter. Numbers can be frightening. We get that. But we're here. And as African Americans in this country, the only thing that we've done, one of the things that we've done more than anything since day one, in spite of all the trials and tribulations, the double standards, the racism, the lynchings, out of all of these things, one of the things that we have tried to do more than anything is acclimate ourselves as American citizens and serve the country well. This is the truth. But instead of engaging with the African-American population, the African-American community in this country, our Republican colleagues in the Republican Party would rather attack. An attack on former President Obama is an attack on every African-American citizen in the country. And if you don't see it as such, then, you may have been born last night. You may be walking around with your head in the clouds too long. And you need to come out of that cloud and really pay attention to what's going on. And that's a talking point. We thank you for joining us tonight during this podcast, talking about an attack on power structure as it relates to what power you have in the voting booth. And this is where we're at in this day and time. And so we wouldn't be doing a service to, first and foremost, the country. To second, for those who have came before us. We wouldn't be doing a just service if we don't look at all the issues, call it for what it is. Vote your choice. But as African Americans in this country, know that no party, Democrat, Republican, Independent. Out of all three parties, no party gives you access to power and control over your daily lives and the ability to live in America with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No party gives you that power like the Democrat Party. And, if there's someone out there who sees otherwise or who begs to differ, make the case. Because right now, the Republican Party can't do it. They can't do it. And if they can do it, what are they waiting for? Because it says a lot about the party when they can't, most people learn from their mistakes and they move on, never to make those same mistakes again. And so, our position here at Soluble is that it's a mistake for the Republican Party not to court African American voters versus trying to, stymie their attempt to vote, take away their right to vote or make it harder for them to vote. This is the worst mistake that the Republican Party can make. But yet, we see it as a mistake in the making here at Soluble. And only time will tell. But if you're an African American voter in this country, know that your vote is under attack. And you have to ask yourself why. You have to ask yourself why. We've served in the military. We fought with the country since day one. We fought against the British alongside General Washington. We fought in World War II. We fought alongside the Union in the Civil War. And as a race of people, we tried to do nothing in this country but serve, doing our best to serve, in all facets of American life, whether it's the military, whether it's civil service, whether it's in political circles. This is all we've tried to do, is to serve for the betterment of the country. But yet and still, we're in a day and time right now where our vote is under attack in Republican circles, not Democrat circles, but Republican circles. So we will continue this discussion, but the $1 million question that we're leaving you with now is your vote is under attack. The power structure of the African American and his ability to grow in this country is under attack in Republican circles. In Republican circles only, not independents, not Democrats. That's not to say that, the Democratic Party holds all the answers to the problems that are plaguing African Americans in this country. That's not what we're saying here at Soluble. But we are saying that you have seats at the table and voices in those seats to make the necessary change or to help spur the change that we know is needed in African American communities, along with our other Democratic colleagues. We have a voice here. What voice do you have in Republican circles? What is the leading nominees talking about now? As I said, one is saying, and we know she's in denial. We know she's delusional. We know we can't go to her in order to address the issues that we've been dealing with since day one. And former Ambassador Haley telling us that this is not a racist country. We can't go to her. The other leading nominee in former President Donald J. Trump, his Make America Great Again vision doesn't include African Americans in the forefront of this vision, because it only came about after the first African American president in the history of the United States of America. It's a dog whistle. You have to read between the lines. And, this is something that should make you even more frown and have little to no respect for the Republican Party, because they can't come outright and say it. They can't come outright and say that, we're afraid of the African American vote. We don't want them in our party. We don't want them, leading the forefront in American politics, because for whatever reason, they're not capable. They're not educated enough, or whatever reason they deem necessary. Just come out and say it. Now, in closing, if there is one candidate in Republican circles who will and can come out and say it, we know that is former President Donald J. Trump. And, all the more reason why we need to come out and show up in November to make sure that, in the words of former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, that this former president never sees the light of day of the Oval Office again. We thank you for joining us tonight here at Soluble. We're always trying to, be insightful, be open-minded in order to bring our listeners up to speed and make them more aware of what's going on. And that's not to say that you're not paying attention elsewhere, but we're going to strive here at Soluble to speak truth to power. We're not reading from a teleprompter. Nothing is scripted here. And most of the time when we're on the air, our eyes are focused on the camera lens so that you, the American people, can see that it's coming straight from the heart based on the way we see it. So we're going to continue to tell it like it is. And when it comes to our political discourse in this country, our goal is to make it more about partisanship, more about bipartisanship, and compromising and reaching across the aisle from whence it used to be. Not, to take it away from where it's slowly starting to go now, where political lines are drawn and, no one wants to compromise. We have the Republican Party that has, steadfast become the party of no, as we talked about in the last podcast with this latest immigration bill. What do they have to run on? The former president says, "Make America great again," but on the campaign trail now, all he seems to be talking about is revenge and wanting immunity. Why does he so bad want immunity? Because he knows how crooked he is? Because he knows how, much of a penchant he has for corruption? This is what you have to ask yourself as the American voter. But for that 90-something plus percentile, trust and believe and know that this is an attack on your power structure as a 90-something plus percentile voting bloc that can't be stopped. And so if we sit on the sidelines and fail to show up on election day, and at the end of the day, the result is former President Donald J. Trump retaking the Oval Office, then we have, no one else to blame but ourselves. Because right now, no other American group, race, group, or whatever is voting 90-something plus percent for one particular party. So you have the power. Can you harness it and wield it in a way where, there's no more complaining, there's no more finger pointing? Because that's the day and time that we're in now. If you vote, then you can use your vote and you can use your political power to enforce change in your communities, in your neighborhoods, and in your everyday lives. And in closing, we say stay vigilant, stay alert, and, all things right now are voter beware. Listen closely, pay attention, and be able to read between the lines when it comes to Republican politicians, because they're not going to come outright and say how they feel. They're great with deception. They're great with propaganda, falsehood, fear-mongering. So let's get ready to, send a message in November with a strong blue wave for the sake of the Republic and for the sake of saving democracy as we know it. We thank you for joining us tonight here at Soluble. We welcome all feedback, all comments, all voices, coming into this discussion, because we know that, two heads are better than one. And we never proclaim to have all the answers. But what we will try to do is keep you current as to what's going on in political circles and why. What to watch out for, where all the hazards lie. That's our goal here at Soluble. And at the end of the day, to try and solve. And our position is that one of the best ways to solve and deal with the political discourse that we're seeing today in America is to fill as many of these seats coming up in November with Democrat politicians, and not just fill these seats, but at the same time, as you know, good patriotic Americans, making sure that Democrat politicians don't stray, they don't become corrupt. You know, what they're saying on the campaign trail, this is what we want to see happening in Washington, D.C. And this is what we see, you know, with the current president of the United States. All the things that he's said, all the strides that he's tried to make to level the playing field for disenfranchised so-called minorities in America. He's doing it to the best of his ability. Now, we need to give him majorities. We need to give him we need to keep the majority in the Senate, and if possible, we need to give him a majority in the House again, and you drown out the outside noise. And as I've said, I'll say it once again in closing: the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So let's be prepared to get out and rock the vote, and you know, get this blue wave to churning, and be ready to crash on the shore come this November. Until we see you again to debate and discuss, you know, the political happenings in America, this is Soluble signing off. Thank you for joining us. Good night and God bless. Thank you.